In the wake of World War II, Weimar Germany has been endlessly dissected as a failed republic. It feels like in the cultural history, we separate the truly dazzling art, culture, and technical advances from the term in retrospect. And yet, in all kinds of artistic and creative fields, from dance to poetry to painting to cinema, 1920s Germany was thriving. However, the Weimar Republic that had emerged reformed in the wake of World War I may have thrown off the monarchy of Kaiser Wilhelm II, but kept all of his massive war debts as well as the massive reparations payments Germany owed after losing the war. Hyperinflation in the early 1920s caused severe economic pain, and by 1923, $1 was worth 4 billion German marks. Factories closed, and the unemployment rate jumped to 4% by 1924, and the cost of living skyrocketed. In the same national trauma, pain, and angst that would lead Germany down the darkest possible path in the 1930s, was birthed one of the most genuinely fascinating artistic movements of the early 20th century, Expressionism. In some ways, this turn to German art, which expressed German trauma and pain, came out of financial necessity. It was too expensive to go abroad for things like films and art because of hyperinflation, and so German art expressing German psychology thrived. This was an artistic movement that uniquely encompassed all fields of art, a revolutionary process that aimed not for realism but to capture the psychic essence. Exploring the avant-garde from painting and photography to live art like drama, theater, poetry, and music leads inexorably to early cinema as an art form that combines all of these different elements in a print. And so, in 1920s Berlin, German Expressionism thrived in cinema. German Expressionist cinema is completely surreal, using dreamlike sets, symbology, and allowing the fantastic to often overwhelm the real. There's a definite nightmarish quality to many of the most well-known Expressionist films. Directors used theatrical sets that often took inspiration from modernist architecture, as well as heavy makeup, dark shadows, and theatrical acting. Most famously, probably, Fritz Lang's science fiction film Metropolis, and also Woman in the Moon, as well as the 1931 thriller M, are pointed to as examples of the artistic movement.
Du hast aber einen schönen Ball. Wie heißt du denn?
Elsie Beckmann.
As well as Robert Wiener's 1920 hypnotic horror masterpiece, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, starring Conrad Veidt as Césaire, the brainwashed sleepwalker. And, just 2 years later, F.W. Murnau would release tonight's film, the first one in our month of vampire films, Nosferatu, a symphony of horror. Nosferatu was the only product of a German studio called Prana Film, which was founded by Enrico Deichmann and an occult artist named Albin Grau. They wished to bring supernatural and occult stories to the screen specifically. But as you can probably guess, running a film studio in the 1920s was insanely expensive, and they only had money for one camera. Prana would pretty much completely collapse within a year of releasing Nosferatu. Not even having the money for multiple cameras, they definitely did not have the money to buy the rights to the book they wished to adapt, Bram Stoker's 1897 novel Dracula. This was Dracula, before Bela Lugosi made his name first on stage, then on screen, terrifying audiences and giving Universal the capital to pump out Frankenstein, the Wolfman, the Mummy, and Bride of Frankenstein. Nobody had adapted Bram Stoker's insanely popular, but at that point, 30-year-old Gothic novel yet, and they planned to do it in German for German audiences. Grau also claimed that during the Great War, he had been on the Serbian front and had learned from a Serbian farmer that the farmer believed his father had been turned into a vampire. The vampire was obviously not a creation of Bram Stoker. There has been a long-standing mythology around vampires in Europe. They differ by a lot, sometimes being closer to werewolves, demons, or witches. Ireland, where Bram Stoker was from, has a history of myths based on succubus-like undead spirits who sometimes return to the grave and drink blood. However, the most common vampire myth is the Strigoi, the Romanian witches who drank the blood of livestock and humans. They could also reanimate the dead and send out their souls to possess the living. These stories have real-life historical figures, whether bloodthirsty nobles like Vlad the Impaler or serial killers whose behavior has been historically explained away through myth-making. And so Dykman and Grau clearly believed that as long as they were careful not to directly copy Bram Stoker's Dracula, they had a case that their occult film was not infringement. They hired Heinrich Gehlin, who had penned the screenplay for the silent horror film The Golem, How It Came Into the World, based on the creature of Jewish legend, and brought F.W. Murnau on to direct. After unsuccessfully attempting to get Conrad Veidt to play the character Count Orlok, who was a barely renamed Dracula, Max Shreck was cast. At the time, Max Shreck had spent the last 3 years playing the freak show landlord in Brecht's play Drums in the Night all over Germany. Nosferatu means the offensive one, or the insufferable one. Heinrich Gehlin attempted to change just enough of Bram Stoker's Dracula to avoid a lawsuit from Bram Stoker's estate. Count Orlok is a strange, inhuman corpse-like figure, which differs dramatically from the Dracula story, which has Dracula looking like an aristocratic human. The original film has its titles in German, the action is moved from London to Germany, the characters are all given German names. As a low-budget film, it was not expected to leave the German audience. They also changed the ending on Bram Stoker's book by having sunlight kill Count Orlok, something that Nosferatu added to our understanding of the vampire tropes. But Florence Stoker, Bram's widow and literary executor, who was struggling financially, decided to sue Piranha Films in court in 1922. Someone had anonymously mailed her a handbill for the Berlin Zoological Society's sumptuous, lavish premiere of Nosferatu. A German court ruled in her favor, ordering all copies of Nosferatu to be destroyed, and it almost happened. However, one final copy of Nosferatu was somehow saved, and it reappeared in 1929 in America. Dracula was in the public domain in America by then, and so a court couldn't demand that last copy be destroyed, and it was given an American premiere. However, the score that Hans Erdmann wrote for the original 1922 premiere has never been found in its entirety and is partially lost. By the end of the 1920s, the German currency had stabilized, and once again, it became possible to purchase films from abroad. The rate and technological innovation happening in Germany, although not the work of German directors, began to slow down. Although probably the most famous Expressionist film, M, would be released in 1931, the movement was essentially over. The center of film innovation was in Hollywood and not Berlin, and as the Nazis crept their way to power, they began sweeping away the traces of Expressionism, labeling the movement degenerate art. Many German artists, filmmakers, and screenwriters, especially those who were Jewish, gay, leftist, or other targeted groups, fled Germany. Many emigrating to an America which happily used their talents and technical knowledge. By 1933, even Fritz Lang, who was offered the dubious chance to run Germany's film industry by Goebbels, had departed first for France, then for America, getting a contract at MGM.
Der Führer und ich haben Ihre Filme Nibelungen und Metropolis gesehen und der Führer hat gesagt, das ist der Mann, der uns den nationalsozialistischen Film schenken würde. Mir war schon vorher nicht sehr angenehm zumute, aber jetzt fingen die ersten Angstschweißtropfen so langsam so das Rückgrat da hinunter zu rollen.
In this way, German Expressionist ideas lived on, not in Germany, but in America and in France's new wave after the war.